My name's Owen, I'm 56, and I used to think of myself as a pretty lucky guy when it came to family. Not perfect, not storybook, but solid. I married my wife, Melissa, when I was 39. She had a 5-year-old son from her first marriage, a quiet, wide-eyed kid named Zach who clung to her hip and flinched whenever his father's name came up. His biological dad had taken off when Zach was 2. No child support, no birthday cards, just vanished. So I stepped in, not out of obligation, but because I loved Melissa, and I knew from day one that loving her meant loving Zach too. And I did. I coached his little league team, helped him build volcanoes for science class, stayed up with him during those nights he had nightmares and didn't want to wake his mom. I never asked to be called Dad. He started doing that all on his own by the time he was 9. But let me make one thing clear. I never expected some grand thank you or parade in my honor. That's not why you raise a kid. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a certain kind of pride seeing Zach grow into the man he became. Smart, driven, charming in a way I never quite mastered. He got into a great college, then landed a solid job right out the gate. I helped him move into his first apartment, bought him his first suit for interviews, and co-signed on his first car. Not because he asked, he never had to. I wanted to. I was proud of him. I felt like I'd done something right. That's why what happened at his wedding still hits like a gut punch. The wedding was this past spring. Melissa and I had been empty nesters for a few years by then, and the wedding planning became our new project. Or should I say, my project. Zach and his fiancée, Julia, had big dreams for their big day. A beautiful vineyard venue an hour outside the city, a live band, catering from a 5-star place downtown, custom flower arrangements, a drone photographer, the whole fairy tale. When they showed us the breakdown of the costs, Melissa looked nervous. I didn't. I just nodded and said, I'll cover it. That became the running joke. Talk to Owen. He's the bank. I didn't mind, really. Not at first. I'd saved for this. I always imagined the day I'd walk my son down the aisle, maybe give a toast, clink glasses, be part of the story. And for months, it was all spreadsheets and vendor calls and tasting menus and seating charts. Melissa handled the emotional side with Julia's family. I handled logistics. Quietly, behind the scenes. That was my style. But then little things started cropping up. Subtle, almost like static in the background of an otherwise clear call. Zach stopped looping me in on planning calls. Julia's mom took over the hotel blocks and vendors. I was asked to transfer the deposit for the band, but wasn't included in the contract. I chalked it up to wedding stress. Then came the head table seating. Melissa mentioned in passing that I wouldn't be sitting with the bridal party. You'll be at table 3, she said, flipping through a chart. You'll have a great view, though. I blinked. Wait, why am I not at the head table? She paused like she hadn't considered it. Well, Julia's parents will be next to the couple. Then her siblings, the maid of honor, best man. There just wasn't space. Zach didn't want me up there. Melissa didn't answer. Just went back to writing names on place cards. That should have been my first real warning. Then came the invitations. I wasn't expecting some special title, but I was surprised when I saw the envelopes that went out. Posted by Melissa and Zachary. No mention of me. Not even Mr. and Mrs., just them. I joked about it one night. Guess I'm just the invisible man, huh? Melissa gave me a tight smile. You know how Julia is about wording. She wanted it to reflect that it's Zach's day. That night, I laid awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering when exactly I'd become a background character in the life of a boy I'd raised like my own. Maybe it was silly. Maybe I was overthinking. But still, it nagged at me. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was at a beautiful restaurant downtown, one I'd made the reservation for and paid in advance. We had a private room, candlelight, personalized menus, all the fixings. Julia's dad gave a speech full of awkward jokes and heartfelt wishes. Her mom followed with a story about Julia's childhood tea parties and dreams of a perfect wedding. Then Melissa spoke, warm, proud, glowing with emotion. Everyone clapped. Glasses clinked. Then Zach stood up. He looked around the room, eyes glistening. I just want to take a second, he began, to thank the people who made me who I am. First, my mom, for everything. For every scraped knee and bedtime story. For always believing in me. He turned to Melissa. She teared up. And second, he continued, to someone who taught me what it means to be a man, who showed me strength, humility, and how to love without expecting anything in return. He's not here tonight, but he's always been in my heart. My father, my real father. I froze. The room went still. I could hear the clink of someone nervously adjusting a fork. Melissa's face fell. Julia blinked, unsure of what to do. And me? I just sat there, heart pounding, hands clenched in my lap, trying to stay composed. He went on for another minute or two, talking about how his biological dad had made mistakes, but was still the man who gave me life. There was no mention of the man who gave him piano lessons, who taught him how to shave, who stayed up with him through high fevers and first heartbreaks. No mention of me. When the applause finally died down, I excused myself to the restroom. I didn't cry, but I did splash cold water on my face for longer than necessary. I told myself it was just nerves, just a fluke. He'd make it up tomorrow. But the wedding day? That was when it all became undeniable. And what happened after the last dance? Well, that's where everything shifted. The morning of the wedding felt calm, almost eerily so, like the kind of silence before a storm when the wind holds its breath. I woke up early despite barely sleeping. Melissa was already bustling around in a silk robe, fluttering from room to room in the hotel suite, checking on makeup appointments and double confirming hair times with Julia's planner. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, sipping lukewarm coffee and wondering what exactly I was even supposed to be doing. I wasn't walking Zach down the aisle. I wasn't giving a speech. I wasn't in any pictures, at least none that included the bridal party. I wasn't even asked to help the groomsmen get ready. When I asked Zach a few weeks before if he needed help tying their ties, something we used to do every Easter and Christmas, he just smiled and said, "Nah, Julia's brother is taking care of all that." Julia's brother. The kid who once spent an entire dinner at our house talking about NFTs like he invented them. Anyway, around 10 a.m., Melissa handed me a dry cleaning bag. "Here's your suit. Make sure it fits okay." I raised an eyebrow. "This isn't the one I had tailored," I said, fingering the unfamiliar fabric. It was a charcoal gray three-piece, decent quality, but not the navy one I'd taken to the tailor 3 weeks prior. The one I'd bought specifically for this day. She paused. "Julia wanted a more uniform look for the pictures," she explained, already halfway into the next task. "Pictures I'm not in," I muttered under my breath. "What?" "Nothing." I changed into the new suit anyway. Because what else was I going to do? Make a scene. It wasn't my day, apparently. I was just footing the bill for it. At the venue, I tried to keep myself occupied. I helped the staff tape down extension cords, carried a few crates of drinks inside, adjusted chairs when one of the ushers noticed they weren't perfectly aligned. Nobody really asked me to do any of this, but standing still felt worse. Melissa was swept up in the bridal prep, and Zach was off with the groomsmen. I barely saw either of them until just before the ceremony, when I caught a glimpse of Zach through the glass doors leading to the courtyard. He looked good, nervous, but sharp. For a second, my chest swelled with pride despite everything. I started walking toward him. He was facing away, laughing at something one of his groomsmen said. I raised a hand. "Hey, Zach." He turned around, saw me, and gave a polite nod. A nod, like I was the valet returning his car. He turned back around before I could say anything else. It stung, but I told myself to let it go. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he didn't want to cry before walking down the aisle. Maybe there was a reason. That's what I kept telling myself, anyway. The ceremony was beautiful. The kind of wedding that'll look perfect in a photo album for decades. Julia walked down the aisle to some orchestral remix of a pop song. Zach's eyes welled up the moment he saw her. I sat next to Melissa, second row. Not first. Second. Behind Julia's extended family. I guess it made sense. They needed the front row for her parents, her sister, her aunt, the maid of honor's boyfriend, and some cousin from Vancouver. But still, I couldn't help noticing. There were speeches after the ceremony, during the reception. Julia's dad gave another toast. Zach's best man told a charming story about college parties and life lessons. Julia's sister read a poem she wrote. Then, right before the dinner began, Zach stood up and tapped his glass. I leaned forward slightly, thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe he's going to say something. Acknowledge the years. The sacrifices. The man who raised him. Instead, he smiled and said, "Before we eat, I just want to thank the people who made this day possible. Julia's parents, for being so supportive and generous. And of course, my mom, for being my rock and my hero." Applause. Clinking glasses. The DJ queued up some soft jazz for dinner ambience. That was it. No mention of me. Not even a vague, sweeping, Thanks to everyone who helped. Just nothing. Melissa squeezed my hand under the table, but didn't look at me. I think she knew. I think she'd known for weeks. Maybe even longer. The final gut punch came during the photo slideshow. They had set up this massive projector screen to display a montage during the cake cutting. Pictures of Zach and Julia growing up, then together. Baby photos, birthdays, prom, college trips, hiking trails, beach shots. A few made the room laugh, like a Halloween costume from middle school or a sunburn vacation pic. But as I watched, something gnawed at me. I wasn't in a single one. Not one. Not even in the background of a Christmas shot or blurry at a birthday party. It was as if I'd been edited out of his life completely. I felt like I was watching the wedding of a stranger. After the cake was cut and the first dances wrapped up, the DJ transitioned into party mode. I made my way to the edge of the dance floor and stood near the bar, nursing a club soda. I don't drink, haven't in over 20 years. But tonight I was tempted. It was there, between two empty champagne flutes and a discarded boutonniere, that Zach finally approached me. He looked relaxed, sweaty from dancing, still glowing from the night. He clapped me on the shoulder. Hey, I meant to catch you earlier. I turned to him slowly. Yeah. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. This has all the final invoices. Catering, rentals, flowers, whatever's left. Shouldn't be much, just the remaining balance. I figured you could settle it Monday. I took the folder without saying anything. And hey, he added, thank you for everything. Seriously, he said it like a waiter dropping off a check. Then he gave a small nod and turned to rejoin the dance floor. I stood there, still holding the folder, while the music pulsed in my ears. The DJ had moved into some upbeat track. People were laughing, twirling, drunk on the moment. But all I could hear was white noise. That's when I opened it. Inside was a printed spreadsheet, neatly organized. Every vendor, every remaining balance, highlighted for convenience. A sticky note attached read, if you can handle this before Friday, they said they'll waive the late fee. Underneath that was a check. From Zach. Made out to me. For $2,000. Not even close to what was left on the bills. Maybe a tenth. I stared at the check. I stared at his handwriting. And then, slowly, deliberately, I took the check between my fingers and tore it in half. Then in quarters. Then into a dozen little pieces. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a scene. I just shredded it right there over the bar top and let the pieces flutter to the floor. I turned and walked straight out of the venue into the cold night air. No goodbye. No final word. I left the folder open on the bar. The last thing I remember was the photographer, camera still in hand, standing near the exit, watching the whole thing. I didn't ask, but I hope, just maybe, he caught the look on Zach's face when he saw what I'd done. Because that was the moment everything changed. That was the breaking point. The drive home from the wedding was quiet. Melissa sat beside me in the passenger seat, still in her pale blue dress, her hair starting to come undone. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was heavy, like wet wool draped over our shoulders. We didn't talk about the check, or the speech, or the folder. We didn't talk about anything. When we pulled into the driveway after midnight, she grabbed her overnight bag and went straight upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, turned on the tap, and just stood there watching the water run into the sink until it overflowed. Then I turned it off. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that sticky note. If you can handle this before Friday, they'll waive the late fee. It wasn't even the money. It was the assumption, the casual expectation that I would pay, and smile while doing it. Like some butler they inherited along the way. Over the next few days, the silence between Melissa and me calcified. She never asked why I left early. She never asked what happened to the check. I didn't volunteer the story, but something shifted between us. It was subtle at first, like the way she stopped making 2 cups of coffee in the morning or the way she turned off the hallway light before I made it upstairs. But over the next few weeks, it became undeniable. She began staying over at Zach's more often, helping with post-wedding cleanup, she said. Then, checking in on Julia while she adjusted. Then, just crashing on the couch because it got late. I didn't question it. I didn't want to hear whatever answer might come. A month passed. Then 2. Thanksgiving came. No invitation from Zach. Not even a courtesy text. Melissa spent it with them, smiling in group selfies that ended up on Facebook. I spent it with a frozen turkey dinner and a rerun of some football game I didn't care about. That was the fall. The quiet, Slow crumble of everything I'd spent 2 decades building. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It wasn't a screaming match or a slammed door. It was worse. It was slow erosion. A gradual fade. Like being ghosted by your own family. And it broke something in me. I started spending more time at work. I was a regional operations manager for a logistics company, the kind of job nobody ever dreams of, but everyone depends on. I'd always done well, but now I buried myself in it. Extra shifts, late meetings, volunteering to train new hires. I even started working weekends, not because they needed me, but because I didn't know what to do with myself anymore. Melissa and I existed like two ghosts in the same house. We'd pass each other in the hallway with tight smiles and polite nods. We didn't argue. We just stopped sharing anything. In January, I came home to find a note on the counter. I've gone to stay with Zach and Julia for a while. I think we both need space. Let's talk in a few weeks. No phone call. No conversation. Just that. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Then I placed it next to the fridge magnet and went upstairs. That night, I pulled out the old photo albums. Not the digital ones, real albums. The kind with thick pages and plastic sleeves. One of them had a faded post-it note stuck to the cover that said Zach's firsts. First Halloween. First baseball game. First trip to the beach. All of them were there. And so was I, behind the camera, beside him, pushing the stroller, holding the kite string. I sat there until sunrise flipping through those pages. And that's when something shifted again, quietly. Internally. Because that was the first night I let myself grieve. Not for the money or the humiliation, but for the loss of a relationship I had given everything to and watched wither without a single thank you. It's strange, but that grief was clarifying. And when the sun finally came up, I decided I was done waiting around. If I was going to rebuild, I had to start with what was left. First came the house. I cleaned it from top to bottom. Every room. I boxed up old things. Donated what I didn't need. I took down the family portraits and stored them in the attic, not out of spite, but because I needed space to breathe. Then I made a doctor's appointment, something I hadn't done in 3 years. Then I joined a gym. I started eating better, waking up earlier. I cut out sugar and started walking every evening after dinner, sometimes just to the corner and back, sometimes for miles. I lost 12 pounds in 2 months. By March, I'd enrolled in a weekend woodworking class at the community center. I'd always liked working with my hands, but never had the time. Now I made time. I started building small things, birdhouses, frames, coffee tables. My hands got rough again. My posture improved. My shoulders didn't ache as much. And for the first time in a long time, I started looking in the mirror and seeing someone I recognized. Then came the offer. My regional director announced he was retiring. Corporate opened the floor for internal candidates to apply. 10 years ago, I might have laughed it off. But now I felt different. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just focused. I updated my resume. I wrote a cover letter that didn't feel like fluff. I scheduled a mock interview with a recruiter friend I hadn't seen in years. And 2 weeks later, I walked into the interview in the same tailored navy suit I'd originally bought for Zach's wedding. Still unworn. Still perfectly fitted. I got the promotion. It came with a raise. A generous one. A new office. More travel. And for the first time in years, a sense of movement that belonged entirely to me. I never bragged about it. Never posted it online. Never even told Melissa. When she finally did text me in April to check in, I responded politely. Briefly. No hard feelings. Just distance. She didn't come back. I didn't ask her to. Zach never reached out either. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he did and didn't care. Either way, I stopped waiting. Instead, I kept building. I turned the old guest room into a workshop. I started selling custom wood furniture on the side, small commissions at first, then a few local shows. It wasn't about the money. It was about putting something into the world that couldn't be erased by a slideshow. Something real. Something mine. And the funny thing was, people noticed. Neighbors. Old friends. Even coworkers. They'd stop me in the hallway or knock on my door and say, "You look different. Happier. Stronger." One even joked I looked 10 years younger. I didn't, of course, but it felt nice to hear. By summer, I was back to hosting barbecues in my backyard. Not big ones. Just a few friends, some music, good food, laughter that didn't feel forced. For a while, the house had felt haunted. Now it felt like home again. That's not to say everything was perfect. There were still days when I passed the wedding photo of Zach and Julia on the fridge at work and felt a pang. Still moments when I caught a familiar song and remembered the slideshow. Still nights when I wondered what I could have done differently. But those moments came less and less often. Because slowly, quietly, I was rising. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But out of something deeper. Dignity. Clarity. Self-worth. And as summer turned into fall, I started hearing whispers, quiet comments from mutual friends. Julia's father's business wasn't doing so well. The apartment they'd rented above their means was becoming a financial strain. Melissa had moved into their guest room full-time. Zach had taken out a personal loan. I didn't comment. I didn't reach out. But I did listen. Because the next part of this story, that's when things get interesting. By the time the leaves started turning and the wind carried that early bite of October, I'd been living alone for nearly 10 months. Melissa was still with Zach and Julia, or, rather, in their guest room, playing what I imagined was some awkward blend of permanent house guest and part-time mediator. She never officially moved out, never filed anything. But the longer she stayed away, the more obvious it became that she had no intention of coming back. Fine by me. I wasn't the same man who stood by the bar at the Vineyard, holding that manila folder and swallowing humiliation. That version of me had vanished quietly, sanded away over long walks, late-night woodworking, early mornings at the gym, and a few dozen quiet moments of painful clarity. But what replaced him? Well, that was still taking shape. I wasn't a vengeful person by nature. I wasn't the type to slash tires or air dirty laundry online. But I was methodical, patient, and I believed in balance. And things were deeply unbalanced. The people I had poured myself into, Melissa, Zach, even Julia to some extent, had used me like a step stool, a resource, a walking bank account with a quiet smile. And when I stopped serving that function, they simply edited me out. But the thing about being underestimated, it gives you room to move. The first domino fell by accident. One of my old college friends, Simon, reached out to congratulate me on the promotion. We met for lunch, just a casual catch-up over burgers and iced tea, and somehow we got onto the subject of weddings. He'd recently paid for his daughter's ceremony and was still seething over the hidden costs. When I shared a few details of my own experience, not naming names, just broad strokes, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "You ever get reimbursed?" he asked. I laughed. Not even close. Did they at least keep the receipts clean? For tax purposes? That stopped me. Tax purposes? Sure, he said. If you paid out of pocket for everything, you might be able to deduct certain vendor expenses, especially if your name's on the contracts. You still got those folders. I didn't, but I remembered what was in them. And that's when the second domino clicked into place. I went home that night and pulled out my desktop scanner. I still had the digital invoices from when I'd wired payments. Most were emailed to me directly back in the spring. I organized them into a folder titled Wedding Files and started sorting. And that's when I saw something odd. Two of the vendors, the photographer and the floral designer, had invoices that didn't match my payment records. I had wired $3,200 to the florist, but their invoice showed only $2,700 due. The photographer showed $4,100, but I'd wired $4,800. I emailed both vendors directly, just to confirm I wasn't imagining things. One replied immediately. Yes, the actual fee was $2,700. We refunded the balance to the bride and groom after the overpayment. Refunded. To the bride and groom. So Zach had been padding the vendor costs, charging me more than they charged him, then pocketing the difference. I stared at that email for a long time. That wasn't just disrespect. That was manipulation. It wasn't just forgetting to mention me in a speech. It was stealing. Calculated, quiet theft. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a slide at a wedding. This was about who Zach had become. And it was time to do something about it. But not loud. Not yet. First, I had to learn more. I reached out to a few people in my old circle. One of them, a retired accountant named Lena, helped me analyze the rest of the files. Over the course of 2 weekends, we found nearly $9,000 in padded costs, fake add-ons, rounded up invoices, duplicated charges that I had paid without blinking. And just like that, the story shifted. I wasn't just a forgotten stepfather. I was a mark, a target. But if Zach wanted to play games with money, he was about to learn who taught him how to budget in the first place. The second phase came through an unexpected connection. One of my woodworking clients was a woman named Elise, sharp, professional, mid-30s. She ran a boutique interior design firm that catered to upscale apartments and small commercial spaces. After I delivered a custom coffee table for one of her clients, she invited me to coffee to talk about possible collaborations. Over the next few weeks, I built 3 more pieces for her, each one more intricate than the last. Word started to spread. I launched a simple website. Nothing fancy, just a gallery, contact form, and price list. But Elise featured me in one of her blog posts, and suddenly I had emails from 3 different design studios asking for commissions. At first, I said no to most of them. My job kept me busy enough. But then Elise asked if I'd ever considered going full-time. "I've seen furniture guys blow up with less talent," she said. "You have an eye for proportion. Balance. I know 2 investors who'd bankroll a small studio tomorrow if you were interested." I wasn't ready for that step. Not yet. But her comment planted a seed. Meanwhile, the whispers around Zach and Julia grew louder. They'd upgraded to a new apartment a month after the wedding. A downtown loft that looked sleek in Instagram pictures, but came with sky-high rent. Julia had quit her job to focus on starting her own event planning business, and Melissa, from what I gathered, was paying for most of the groceries. I didn't ask. People told me. And then, one evening in early November, I got a call. From the father of the groom. Julia's father. We'd only met a handful of times. We weren't close, but he sounded frazzled on the phone. "I hate to bring this up," he said, "but I just wanted to ask, did Zach ever repay you for the wedding expenses?" I nearly dropped my mug. "Excuse me. It's just, he came to us last week asking for help covering some past due balances. Said he was short because he already paid you back. I just wanted to confirm." I paused. "No. He didn't repay me. Not a dime." There was a long silence. "I thought so," he muttered. That conversation confirmed everything I suspected. Zach wasn't just entitled. He was actively lying to everyone around him. So I got to work. I pulled all the padded invoices, refund notices, and wire records into a single spreadsheet. Color-coded. Annotated. I wrote a short letter, not threatening, just factual, and had a lawyer friend review it. Then I printed 2 copies. I didn't send them. Not yet. Because that wasn't the moment. The moment came a week later, on Thanksgiving. I wasn't invited, of course. Melissa had posted pictures again. Julia in a cream sweater holding a wine glass. Zach carving a turkey with forced confidence. My wife grinning like she was part of some commercial for perfect families. What they didn't post was the fight that happened after dessert. I didn't witness it. But a friend of Julia's sister DM'd me that night, saying, "I don't mean to stir things up, but your stepson just got dragged across the table by his father-in-law. Something about money." I thanked her. Then I waited. 2 days later, I got a text from Melissa. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply right away. I let her sit in it. The next day, I responded, "Sure. Come by Friday evening." And that's when the final stage began. The stage where I would reclaim not just my dignity, but everything they took from me without even blinking. Melissa arrived Friday evening just after 6. She looked older. Not aged exactly, just tired. She was still wearing the familiar coat I'd bought her years ago on a rainy trip to Boston, but it hung looser now. Her hair, once meticulously styled, was swept into a careless bun. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked like someone living in a house that wasn't hers. I let her in without a word. She stepped into the kitchen and glanced around. The space had changed. New backsplash, refinished cabinets, handmade oak stools I'd built myself. She didn't comment. Just stood there, awkward, like a guest in a stranger's home. "Coffee?" I offered. She nodded. I poured her a cup, black, just how she used to like it. We sat at the kitchen island, the silence stretching between us. She finally broke it. "I heard about the promotion." I gave a polite nod. "Yeah, it's going well." More silence. Then, Zach told me about the invoices. The refunds. I raised an eyebrow. "He told you?" "Well, he admitted some of it after Julia's dad confronted him. You know how he gets when he's cornered." I didn't respond. Just waited. Melissa stared down at her cup. "I'm not here to defend what he did. He panicked. The wedding got out of control. He thought he could make some of it back quietly." "That wasn't panic," I said calmly. "It was calculated. I paid $38,000 for that wedding. He skimmed nearly $9,000 of it, then handed me a folder like a waiter dropping a bill." She looked up. Her eyes glistened. "I know," she whispered. I should have stopped it. You didn't stop it, I said. You watched it happen. You let him erase me, Melissa. Her lip quivered. He's my son. And I was your husband, I said, voice steady. For 18 years. She didn't argue, just nodded, eyes full of silent apologies she didn't say out loud. I stood and walked over to the counter, pulling out a large envelope. I slid it across the island toward her. She hesitated. What's this? My formal separation agreement, I said. Drafted, notarized, and signed. She blinked, stunned. You're divorcing me? I'm finalizing what you already started, I replied. I didn't. Yes, you did, I cut in. The day you moved into his guest room and never came back. She reached for the envelope with shaking hands, pulling out the papers. As she flipped through them, she stopped. You're not asking for anything, she said, voice confused. No alimony. No house claim. Nothing. I shook my head. No. But I am keeping everything I already built. You walked away from it, Melissa. I'm just closing the door behind you. She stared at the pages like they might dissolve if she blinked too hard. I'll give you until Monday to sign and return it, I said. If not, my lawyer files it anyway. She didn't say anything for a long time. Just nodded once. Stood slowly. Can I at least explain? You had 10 months, I said gently. You made your choice. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. With a final glance at the home she no longer recognized, she left. I locked the door behind her. The next part was quieter. I waited 3 days. Long enough for the fallout from the Thanksgiving fight to simmer. Long enough for Melissa to tell Zach what I'd done. Long enough for Julia's father to start asking real questions. Then I mailed the second copy of the invoice packet to Julia herself. I didn't write a letter this time. Just highlighted all the padded costs and included the email confirming which refunds went where. I never heard back directly. But 3 days later, I received a very short, very nervous voicemail from Zach. Hey, can we talk? I didn't realize you were keeping all that stuff. I think we might have. I just think we need to clear the air. I didn't respond. 2 days after that, he showed up at my office. He actually had the nerve to bring coffee. Like this was a casual drop-in. I met him in the lobby. He looked frayed. The confident glow from the wedding was gone. His shirt was wrinkled. Eyes bloodshot. The kind of face that hadn't slept properly in weeks. Dad, he started. I held up a hand. Don't. He stopped, shoulders sagging. I'm not your father, remember? I said quietly. You made that very clear. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I messed up. Okay. I thought I could make it back before anyone noticed. I didn't think you'd. Keep receipts. I finished. Track payments. Follow patterns. He winced. You knew who I was, Zach, I said. You learned from me. You counted on me being meticulous. You just didn't think I'd use it against you. I wasn't trying to hurt you, he muttered. You were trying to steal from me, I said, and erase me in the process. He looked down. Julia's furious. Her dad's threatening to pull out of the startup loan. Melissa's moving out. I know, I said. He looked up. I also know you've maxed out 2 credit cards, I continued, and that your name's not on the lease for that loft. Julia's parents are the guarantors. His jaw tightened. Did you dig into my finances? No, I said. You told me everything I needed to know. With your behavior. He looked like he wanted to scream. Or cry. Or beg. I didn't give him the chance. You wanted to clear the air, I said, stepping back. So here's your air. I'm done. No more checks. No more second chances. No more emergency transfers. You don't get to lie, steal, and call me family in the same breath. He swallowed hard. So that's it. That's it, I said. You wanted a life without me in it. You got it. I turned and walked back to my office. I didn't look back. He didn't follow. In the months that followed, I rebuilt everything. The divorce finalized quickly. Melissa never contested it. I kept the house, the savings, the retirement accounts. She moved into a small condo near her sister and stopped posting family pictures. Her Facebook quietly deactivated. Zach and Julia's marriage didn't last much longer. From what I gathered, through the grapevine, not by prying, Julia discovered he'd been borrowing from her accounts too. Their split was messy. Public. Her father pulled funding from the startup, and last I heard, Zach had moved back in with a college friend and was working contract jobs to cover his debt. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Because real revenge isn't about fireworks. It's about removal. It's about letting people fall into the holes they dug for you and walking away while they flail. Meanwhile, my side business thrived. I expanded the woodworking shop, hired a part-time assistant, and started selling pieces through a local gallery Elise introduced me to. My full-time job remained steady, but I'd found joy in building something with my hands again, something that no one could take. The final message I received from Zach came on a gray April morning, nearly a year after the wedding. It was an email. Short, unapologetic. I still think you overreacted, but I guess you did what you felt was right. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. I printed it out, framed it, hung it in my workshop, just above my workbench. And every time I see it, I smile. Because yes, I am happy. And I hope the photographer caught the look on his face.